Hey there, I'm Nina with Nina Suggs Watercolor. Thank you for joining me today and welcome. So the project that we're going to be doing today is this little leaf. Is it not so cute? I love it. And believe it or not, it took me about an hour to complete this project. So what you're going to be working on in this is wet and wet techniques mostly, because that is going to allow us to incorporate all those rich golden tones and the reds and the rust colors and let them just intermingle and create texture in this leaf. Then, if you've ever heard of a bloom in your watercolor painting, you know that blooms are kind of like a word that you don't want to hear that someone has had happen in their artwork. But in today's project, we're going to create blooms on purpose. We want to create as much texture in this leaf as possible, and strategically and purposefully adding some blooms is what's going to help us get there. I'm going to show you how you can just paint loosey-goosey and create this fun leaf. And at the very end, I'm going to incorporate a little bit of finer detail in case you want to include it in yours. But remember that this is just a jumping off point for you. If you don't want to do a lot of detail, you don't have to. But I'm that kind of gal, so I have to put a little more detail in mine. And the fun part at the very end is that gold leaf. I love all things that is sparkly and glittery and gold, so I had to put some gold leaf onto this little painting. It's really an easy process. You just put down some glue, let it set up, and then put down the gold leaf. It's a lot of fun. So remember, if you want to do the gold leaf, you can. If you don't want to do the gold leaf, you don't have to. As you can see, I have included my little painting in part of my fall decor. And you can do that if you want to. And keep in mind, you can do this same idea for any holiday or really any project at all. If you wanted to paint a flower for spring and add some gold leaf, you certainly can. Anyway, this is a really fun, fast, super beginner-friendly technique, and I hope that you'll enjoy it. Make sure that you share it with me. Either email it to me at this email address, or you can go to Nina Suggs Watercolor on Facebook, or join my private group, which is called Watercolor Wisdom. I'd love to have you a part of my group. Anyway, have a great day, enjoy the painting, and I'll talk to you soon. As we're getting started to paint this leaf, the first thing that I want to do is decide how I'm going to approach it. So what I'm thinking on this is, because it's a really large area to cover and try to get a lot of color in at once, we're going to break it into two sections, the left side and the right side. So what we'll do is we'll begin by just flooding the left side of our drawing of the leaf with water. This is going to prep the paper. It's going to get it ready so that when you put your color in, and your color is going to follow the moisture, we're going to allow this water to settle into the paper, kind of sink in a little bit, so that when we put our base wash of yellow on, it's going to go into the fibers of the paper and stay there, because we're going to be putting wet into wet on this painting, and that means we want that first wash to stay stuck, so that's why we're doing this prep with the water first. I've started out my first wash with Indian yellow. It's a rich, gorgeous, warm yellow. So this is going to be the base wash covering all this left side of this leaf, and then we'll come back later and we'll add additional colors on top to add some texture and to create the reds and the deeper tones that we see in this autumn leaf that's going from green to yellow and then to red. Now that we have the yellow in place on this left-hand side, we're going to wait and let it dry before we come back and move on to the right side. I've already gotten the right side of this leaf wet with water and allowed it to sink in just like I did on the left side. So now I'm taking the same Indian yellow and I'm going to cover this whole right side of the leaf exactly the same way that I did on the left side. The thing that I am going to pay attention to here is there are some parts of this leaf that the yellow is a little bit lighter and not quite as vivid and saturated. So on those parts of the leaf, I'm not going to put quite as much of this Indian yellow pigment. I'm going to leave it a little more water and a little less pigment, so that those areas will remain a little paler, a little lighter wash than some of the rest of the leaf. I'm creating a mixture that is quinacridone rose in with the Indian yellow just to warm it up and make it slightly more orange. And then we're going to add some of this color in areas where it needs to go darker. I prepped this side of the leaf again with just clear water, and now I'm coming in with the mixture of that Indian yellow with a little bit of the quinacridone rose that has just made it a little more richer even still, and deepened the value slightly because I realized that my base wash was just slightly lighter than what I wanted it to be. So I wanted to correct that so that I could make sure and create the areas in this leaf that are a little bit lighter in comparison with the areas that are a little bit darker. I added just a touch of blue and a little bit more of the quinacridone rose into that Indian yellow. And you can see me here picking up just some of the quinacridone rose on its own, but I haven't cleaned my brush. That yellowy orange mixture is still in there. And as you can see, I'm just tapping this color wet into wet. And this is going to help me to create the texture that I see in this leaf. And it's going to add some of that gorgeous, rusty barn red color in those areas of the leaf where it's most prevalent. Now over on the other side of the leaf, I'm doing the exact same thing. So anything that we do on the left-hand side of the leaf, we're also going to mimic that on the right-hand side of the leaf. So what you can see me doing here is, again, I've wet the paper first with just clean water, and now I'm coming in just like I did on the other side with that richer, more reddish color, and I'm adding that in, and then I will go back and I will splotch in some of that quinacridone rose just to start creating that texture like you see on the left-hand side. So here we are with the quinacridone rose. Again, I'm painting wet into wet. That is the main technique that is being used in this particular painting, is wet into wet. The purpose for that is because this color needs to be able to blend out and merge into the colors that are already there, or give us softer edges. We want to create texture, but we don't want hard lines. When you look at the reference photo, you'll see what I mean. The colors are there, but they all kind of just intermingle and run in and out of each other. Now you can see here that there's some areas I'm trying to create and make even darker, create more of a red effect. And I have to say that quinacridone rose mixed with this Indian yellow creates such a gorgeous combination into this beautiful orange color, which is so reminiscent of autumn, because right now I'm looking out the window of my office space and the leaves here are already starting to turn a little bit, not from being cold, but from lack of rain, but nevertheless, they're starting to look gorgeous. I realized that I wanted my color to go a little bit more on the deeper side and a little more on the brown side. So simply what I did was I mixed all three of my primary colors, some of the yellow, the red, and a touch of the blue, and that has created for me a little more of a brownish color with a red undertone to it, which is what I want so that I can start deepening up some of these areas that needs to be even darker than what I currently have it. Now here, I've got a clean brush with just clear water on it, and I'm dropping little bits of that water onto the top of the damp surface. What this is going to do is create blooms or cauliflowers. It's called one or the other, or sometimes people call it a back run. Most of the time, you don't want to create blooms or cauliflowers in your painting. However, for this particular one, we are going to purposefully do that even for more texture. As you can see here, just mimicking the same thing that I did on the left-hand side, using that orange mixture, the Quin Rose, and then I will dip into that reddish brown shade that I made to add some more depth. And as you can see, I'm kind of starting to dabble in this color along where the veins are going to go. You probably will notice that more on the left-hand side than the right-hand side right now, but you want to make sure that you start laying out where those veins are, and then later you will put them in darker and make them show up even more. So right here you'll see that I have taken that reddish brown color and I've intensified it, I've made it thicker because the veins in this leaf do show up and we want to make sure that they are seen. Some of the veins are a little more brown, some go a little more red. So as I paint these veins in, where I see that they're a little more red, I will just add some quinacridone rose to my brush, and where they're darker and more brown, I will pick up that mixture of brown that I created. Now the thing that I kept in mind here is that I wanted the veins to show up, but I don't want them to look like someone took a marker or an ink pen and drew them in. So I'm using a really fine brush and I'm just very, very lightly just tickling the paint right along the surface of the paper. That way those veins are going to show up, but they're not going to take away from the rest of the leaf. down here where the stem runs into the midrib vein and all the other little veins, it's kind of dark right there because I'm assuming that this leaf is changing color kind of from the stem into the leaf is what it appears. So I'm adding that darker color and then taking a clean damp brush just to blend out those edges and keep them smooth. And again, I'm just using a very, very watery mixture of that reddish brown color. And in the areas of the leaf that I see that still need to go darker, I'm using this very watered down mixture of that color. And I'm just more or less scribbling it in place. And then I'll take my brush and rinse it and come back in with just a damp brush to soften those edges out, because even though I want texture, still I don't want a lot of hard edges in this leaf. Now here is where I'm putting the stem in to this leaf. I'm starting out with a base wash of yellow, then I come in with the quinacridone rose and I'll add some of that in, and then finally I'll use a little bit of the blue for the areas that are really darker. Down at the very end where the stem has broken off from the branch, it gets much darker down there. So I'll just use my blue and I'll tap some of that in place on top of this yellow and red, which is going to create a very dark chocolatey brown color. Right here, I've taken one of my lifting brushes, I'm dipping it in water, and then using that, and wherever I see that there is light reflected onto the leaf, close to the veins in this particular reference photo, I'm just rubbing a little bit of water into those areas, then taking the paper towel and just dabbing that up. And what that is doing is it is wetting the surface of the paint, and because I have several layers on there, and typically red is an easier color to lift, I'm just lightly rubbing the surface of the paper just to lift a little bit of that color up and create some reflections. And now for the sparkle. This is the gold leaf that I'm using, and this is one that can be picked up anywhere. If you've never used gold leaf before, there's just little pieces of tissue paper with the gold leaf in place. Now gold leaf is very, very fine. See how I'm just using my hand and creating a small breeze and it's really moving around? Leave it under the tissue paper until you get ready to use it. I have a nice soft brush here that I'm going to use to not only apply the gold leaf to the paper, but also lift it off. This is a cheap old brush that I have not really used in years. I'm going to use it to put the glue in place. So the way that I'm applying the glue is I'm just dipping this old brush into the bottle of adhesive. Then I'm using the back end of another brush to nicely and softly tap on that brush and just create little splatters, because I'm wanting to create a subtle reflected effect on top of this leaf, because I felt like it would be pretty just to add a little bit of shine and luster to this project, especially since I'm using it for fall. I've allowed the glue, the adhesive, to set up, and now I'm gently taking this gold leaf and laying it on top of my painting. Then I'll use this brush and just start tapping it on top. And once I know that it has grabbed hold of that adhesive, then I'll just use the brush just to smooth everything out over the top of the adhesive where it's all splattered in place. Now let me warn you, gold leaf is very light like a feather and it will fly everywhere. So I've just got my soft brush and I'm just scrubbing around on top of where this gold leaf was, and anywhere that there is not glue, then the gold leaf is going to detach from the paper. Wherever the glue is, it's going to stick. Now this brush is super duper soft, so I will ultimately, I'll take my finger and lightly rub over the top of the paper, just so if there's any little loose edges that are sticking up, they will rub off. And then as you can see, I have a paper towel here. This is a great way to gather up your little scraps. And then any of the places where you see that there's some adhesive or some glue and the gold leaf didn't stick to it, then just use these little scrap pieces. That way you're not going to waste any gold leaf. Let me say that gold leaf is not super expensive and it's really easy to use. So if you are like me and you love things that sparkle and glitter, you're going to want to include gold leaf in some of your watercolor painting projects. Now that we're finished with the project, is it not gorgeous with that little bit of gold leaf on there just to give it a little dazzle? I absolutely enjoyed this tremendously, and it's so quick and so fast. If you have any questions, here's my email address. Be sure to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you would like to join my Facebook page, this is my regular Facebook page, and I have a private group called Watercolor Wisdom. Be sure to visit my website, grab this tutorial, finish it, and please share your finished painting with me. I want to see it. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.